Civil War, right? And Harrison fought on the Union side in the Civil War, and he earned the nickname Little Ben from the men he commanded. Little Ben. And they referred to him as Little Ben because he only stood 5'6" tall. Short guy, tight, pretty big. So, he commanded troops in the Civil War on the Union side. He earned the nickname from Little Ben from his men. He's a very strong leader, but he was only 5'6" tall, which is pretty short at that time for a commanding general, I suppose. After the Civil War, he decided he was going to run for governor of Indiana and lost. So after the Civil War, Harrison runs for governor of Indiana. He moves to Indiana and runs for governor, but loses. President Garfield offers him a position in his cabinet, but he turns it down because he ran and was elected to the United States Senate in 1881. So after he loses his bid to be governor of Indiana, President Garfield, prior to his assassination, offers Benjamin Harrison a job in his presidential cabinet. He turns it down because he runs for and wins a seat in the United States Senate in 1881.
For Ohio or Indiana?
No, Indiana.
Okay.
No, did I say Indiana? No, Ohio. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, big senator. Right. Now, we haven't got to this yet, but Harrison's going to run for re-election in 1892. And guess who's going to defeat him? The man he defeated in 1888, Grover Cleveland. So he and Cleveland are going to lock horns again in the election of 1892, which we'll talk about. But this time, Cleveland's going to defeat Harrison, so he will not win his bid for re-election. And that was a tough time for him because his wife died just 2 weeks before election day. So he lost his wife 2 weeks before election day and then lost the election. So he had kind of a double loss there. Well, after he is president, he leaves office because he's defeated by Grover Cleveland. He goes back home and starts to practice law. He's a lawyer after all. So after the presidency, he goes back and practices law. In 1896, he remarries a lady by the name of Mary Lord Dimmick. 1896, he remarries Mary Lord Dimmick. And this might sound weird to you, but I think it's a great story, and I'm going to tell you a quick story about it, about something similar. Mary Lord Dimmick was a lady who had cared for Harrison's wife during her illness prior to her death. She was very ill prior to her death. And Mary Lord Dimmick, who cared for Mrs. Harrison during that time, is the one he married. And you can all think, oh, that doesn't sound kosher. Well, let me tell you a story about a guy, a friend of mine named Bob Orrin. Bob Orrin is an interesting guy, a good friend of mine from Laurel, Montana. And his best friend got cancer. And Bob was a bachelor his whole life, 55-year-old bachelor, okay? He was a coach in Laurel, and he just was on the go, really high-strung guy, and I guess never found time for a wife or wanted her, okay? Anyway, his friend contacted cancer, and they were friends for a long, long time, and obviously he was friends with the wife as well. His friend's last dying wish to Bob, a friend of mine, is, I want you to marry my wife and take care of her. They were close friends. I don't know if they loved each other, but they were close friends. Well, Bob wasn't going to marry anybody else, and I'm guessing that his friend's wife, most women sometimes don't get remarried if they lose her husband, especially late in life. And he evidently had talked to his wife about this, and he made Bob promise that after he died that he would take care of his wife. Marry his wife and take care of her. And he did. And I think they have a relationship that might not be based on the same thing as everybody else, but they're both very, very happy. I think they're very good friends. I don't, know their private life, but I thought it was a cool thing for him to take care of his best friend's wife, and he would have never married, probably. So people do things like that, and I don't know if that was a story with Mary Lord Dimmock or not, but it's what happened, okay? Now, Benjamin and Mary did have a daughter together. These people I told you about late in life obviously don't have any children together. Well, in 1897, Harrison wrote a book about the federal government entitled This Country of Ours. 1897, Harrison writes a book entitled This Country of Ours. Fairly rare book. Not something you find every day. And I just happen to have, I'll let you look at it, be very careful. I just happen to have it, first edition, first printing of the book, right here. This Country of Ours by Benjamin Harrison. This is the book he wrote. Let me look at the copyright on this and be very careful. I'd assume maybe you didn't even open it, but... Oh, copyright, 1897. So, this thing is old, okay? But you're welcome to keep it shut and look at it. But that is a first edition, first printing of the book called This Country of Ours. Well, Benjamin Harrison eventually died on March 13th of 1901. He was 68 years old. March 13th of 1901. He was just 68 years old. And this would be important to you. During the time he served as president, 2 states came into the Union, Idaho and Wyoming. Yep, Idaho and Wyoming came into the Union during Harrison's term. Okay, that'll move us on to the next election, the election of 1892. Election of 1892. Okay, this is an interesting election. Do you kind of wonder why Harrison didn't get reelected? You got 2 presidents, one former president and a president running against each other. That's a little weird, you know what I mean? So, it's pretty simple. The Republican Party is going to nominate President Harrison for re-election, right? And the Democrats are going to nominate former President Grover Cleveland. This is a weird election. You have never seen that since. But what hurts Harrison, because most of this country is Republican, is a third party comes in. The Populist Party. Grover Cleveland. And then what happens that hurts Harrison is a third political party comes in, the Populist Party, and they nominate James B. Weaver. So you got 3 parties, 3 candidates. And it just so happened that the Populist Party was organized, and the people that belonged to that party were farmers. Farmers. So, evidently the farmers weren't very thrilled on either candidate, right? And so they formed their own political party, the Populist Party, and they nominate their own candidate that would be pro-farmer, James B. Weaver. Well, kiddos, in a country where most of the people say they're Republican, who's that going to hurt the most? Harrison, right? Because all the votes that Weaver get, more than likely are coming from Republicans, not Democrats. And it turns to be true because Cleveland wins this election 277 electoral votes to Harrison's 145. And it's mainly because of the third political party and the farmers. Okay? Historians would say that that election probably would have been much closer, and maybe Harrison could have even won if there was not a third political party involved. So the Democrats win the election. Cleveland gets 277 electoral votes. Harrison 145. So Grover Cleveland becomes the 24th president of the United States and the first former president to be elected non-consecutively. We've had several presidents elect consecutively, but he's the only one in history that was elected non-consecutively.
24, yeah.
Now, what's important to the Democratic candidate Cleveland? He needs to have control of Congress, and it just so happened in this election the Democrats control Congress, so he's in good shape. He's got a Democratic Congress behind him. Now, this is unusual. Normally, when a third party comes in, they very seldom ever win any electoral votes. Well, Weaver actually won 22 and over 1 million popular votes. So you can tell the impact it had on this election. So it made a difference. Okay, that'll take us to our last subtopic of this particular test material, and that's the election of 1896. The election of 1896. Could Cleveland run again if he wanted to? Surely could have, because the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution didn't come in until the Eisenhower years. But he decided he did not want to run again. So the Democrats nominated a congressman from Nebraska by the name of William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan. There's kind of a unique thing about William Jennings Bryan, too. So, President Cleveland declines an opportunity to run for a third term. As a result, the Democrats nominate Nebraska Congressman William Jennings Bryan. He was only 36 years old. In other words, if he wins this election, he would be by far the youngest president ever to be elected president. At this point, the record's still held by John Kennedy at 43. John Kennedy was 43 when he was elected. Theodore Roosevelt was younger than Kennedy, but he wasn't elected at 42. He was assumed the presidency, which we'll talk about next time. The Republican Party chose Ohioan William McKinley. We won't worry about Arthur Sewell or Garrett Hobart, okay? They were vice presidential candidates, I don't care. William McKinley. He was also from Ohio. A lot of Ohio guys, yeah?
You know how they announce the president? They probably hear William, they get all excited, and then they hear the other last name, they're like, oh.
Oh, yeah, so it's William Jennings Bryan versus William McKinley. Good point.
I really wouldn't.
Now, there was another party that came in. Which was the same party that came in the 4 years before, which was what? Populist Party. But the thing was, they also nominated William Jennings Bryan. So he becomes a person that's nominated by two separate parties in the same election. Well, when the smoke cleared, McKinley's going to win the most electoral votes, 271 to Bryan's 176. 271 to 176. And William McKinley will become the nation's 25th president. 25th. Now, let me give you a little side note here. McKinley's vice president at this time is not Theodore Roosevelt. But when we get to the election of 1900, who's his vice president going to be? Theodore Roosevelt. And what's going to happen to McKinley? He's going to be assassinated, and Theodore Roosevelt's going to assume to the presidency, and he will be the youngest man in American history ever to be president. But John Kennedy still is the youngest man in history ever elected president.
Wait, who's Tom Watson?
The booking his thing when he got shot.
Yeah. Saved his life. Any questions? Yes.
Who's Tom Watson?
Don't worry about any of those other names on there. Okay, you can cross them off.